Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Africa, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. America, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javan Okello, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Greetings, beautiful people. Thank you for joining me for another amazing episode of the African Father in America podcast. My name is Simon Javan Okello, and I am in Seattle, Washington, here in the west coast of the US. And today I am truly privileged to be having a wonderful sister as a guest here. Miriam Segen is an incredible leader and is joining us today for the show. This is an episode that we've been working on for quite a long time, and I'm just so happy that it's finally happening. Miriam is the founder of the African Art Society. Miriam, do you want to just say hi quickly before we continue on with the conversation?
Hi everyone. Good morning for those in the US, and I'm based in London, so it's the afternoon for me. But I'm happy to be here and have a conversation with you, Simon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Miriam Segen. I always call you Segen, and I was saying just before the show began that I have a lot of love and respect for you, especially because of the content of the work that you do. With art, and also the content of your tweets. You always share very deep, historical, meaningful posts on Twitter, especially around the Horn of Africa, which we really need right now. A lot of the time when we hear about Africa, no matter which part of Africa, we just hear it from other sources, not our people, especially read and educated people like you. So our conversation today, for those who are joining us for the first time, is going to be grounded on another African proverb. Every episode of the African Father in America podcast since 2020 February has always been grounded by an African proverb. And so today our episode takes us to Nigeria, where our proverb says that truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap. Truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap. Today's proverb is a powerful reminder of the cleansing power of truth. While soap can remove dirt, grime from your hands, only truth can purify your souls. And I want to share 3 nuggets of wisdom that can just deepen your understanding of today's proverb before we jump into hearing what our guest thinks about this proverb, and also learning a lot more about her background and also some of the work that she's currently doing in London. So the first nugget of wisdom, before I do that, I actually want to remind all our viewers and our listeners, some of whom are in London, some of whom are also joining us, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's one of the ways that you can help grow this platform. And also make sure you share this video, whether you're watching on TikTok, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Take a moment and share this video, leave your comment so that we know that you're watching, but also so that we know your understanding of today's proverb. So I said that the proverb is from Nigeria, and it says that truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap. This is the first nugget of wisdom inspired by this proverb, the cleansing power of truth. This Nigeria proverb underscores the idea that the truth has a powerful cleansing effect in our lives. Just as soap cleanses our hands, the truth can purify our actions and intention and keep us on the right path. If you are guided by truth, you are almost as if you're walking with your. If you all remember during the pandemic, you only wanted to associate with people who had hand sanitizers. Now, this proverb reminds us that keeping your hands clean is really almost like being truthful. And so let your actions be guided by truth. Let truth be like your soap. Walk with it everywhere. Number 2, honesty is essential. It's one of the basics. The proverb here reminds us that there is a lot of importance when it comes to honesty and being truthful in our lives. Being truthful can help us build stronger relationships, gain trust with others, and live our conscience with a lot of clarity, sleep well. Many people who are always dishonest have even a hard time falling asleep. Their minds are disturbed all the time. So if you want to sleep well, be truthful. Number 3, truth brings peace. Living a life of honesty and truthfulness can bring a sense of peace and contentment in our lives. By being true to ourselves and others, we can avoid the stress and anxiety that often comes with living a life of deception and deceit. Miriam, again, when you hear all this and when you hear this Nigerian proverb, truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap, what is it that comes to your mind?
Make me think of we have a tendency when things in life to cover up or look at hiding by having something that looks nice and looking at superficiality to cover for struggles or any issue that we may have. We tend to ignore the truth, and the truth, whether it's living by your own truth or really not hiding and it doesn't matter how much you clean, how much you hide, how much you cover up. The truth will only be the thing that will allow you to move forward with your life, be with others. You mentioned how people would only, during pandemic, where people were thinking of, I don't want to get close to anyone who's not washing their hands. But when you think about your truth, how does it allow you to live amongst people? When I think about community, something I care a lot about, your truth would allow you to live amongst people and others and be connected to the wider community.
I love that. Thank you so much, Miriam. And also thank you to everyone who is joining us on TikTok. I want you to make sure you share the live if you're watching the show on TikTok, and also invite some of your friends who are joining us for the show. We are also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And, without you all, we cannot have these important conversations that we are having right now with our wonderful guest, Miriam. Again, Miriam is, as I said earlier, is the founder of the Africa Art Society, which was set up to connect audiences to contemporary artists of African descent. And Miriam sits on the board she sits on the board of the Equalities Advisory Committee of South London Gallery. This is beautiful work. You don't find a lot of Africans in spaces like this. And I want you to share with us just a little background story of how did you, what is it that happened in your childhood, maybe when you were 8 to 16, that really inspired who you are today as a leader. And whenever you are in these spaces, advocating for African artists, you are reminded of that moment of your childhood that drives you even today as we are here having this conversation.
Yeah. So I grew up in France, and I came as a refugee with my parents. It was during the time of the independence war for Eritrea. And so we were not many Eritreans in France, but we were all connected irrespective of the city where we were. And something that my dad was doing during the time since the day we arrived in France was to stay connected to the community, but not just to have that link with others, but also to whatever knowledge he was getting, whatever access and information he was getting, he was making sure that it was spread around the community. He was giving guidance. He was mentoring pushing everyone to the broader community to find the best path to make sure that they were having a safe life and able to raise their children. So my dad was very much someone that cared a lot about the community and making sure that everyone was successful, but also was able to access the same thing that he was able to for his own family. And that's something that struck me. It was very important to me. It's something that I didn't realize at the time. I was just seeing my dad just being encouraging everyone. But that's something that for me showed that how important it is to whatever privilege you have access to, whatever network you have access to, it's important to share it with the wider community so that everyone can to lift up everyone and making sure that you get to that place where you everyone is accessing the same privilege that you have. And that's something that became very much important to me as I was getting access to certain other type of privilege, whether it was in France or now in the UK. So that's something that really, that still remains with me and something that inspired me a lot. And I'm hoping to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I remember being raised by a mother that fits the characteristics of your dad that you're describing to us, who was always not just fighting for us as her children, but we had tens of children that lived with us in our household on a day-to-day basis, and it really shaped who I am today. And I love that you're taking these lessons from your dad and you're bringing it to Europe, from France to now London, where you are not just focused on your own initiatives, but you're deeply involved with human rights work in Eritrea. You are focused on the way that refugees are being treated is something that concerns you, and you are very passionate about the work that is going on in South London Gallery. I was telling you before the show that my oldest sister and her family live in South London, and so what the work you're doing is very important to me. I just realized that right now. So I want you to talk to us about what is it of the work you do at South London Gallery. What is it about it that makes you, very, very proud?
Yeah, so I think I've been interested in African art, in art in general for the longest, and more specifically artists that are coming from the African continent, whether they are based in Africa or they're in the diaspora, because it talks to me. But I also see so much value, whether even if you're not an artist or someone who wants to become an artist, as a human being, as an African, art has been present on the African continent for the longest. We don't talk too much about it. We don't have the knowledge about how far it goes, but it's been there for the longest. And it's important to me to have that connection with to learn from artists from African descent. So that's why I have I decided to build that African Art Society platform. I'm spending so much time going around art exhibition and also meeting artists to show their existence and the work they are doing. When it comes to the South London Gallery, it's based in South London, obviously, but it's also so I don't know if you're familiar with London. The area of East London is there's a huge African diaspora from Ghana, from Nigeria, but also from Somalia and other places in Africa. And the place that the South London Gallery has in the middle of that large African community is very crucial, because we have a program that is free to bring the children of the community into the art world, to teach them about the different type of arts that exist and get them very familiar. There's also a film program to expose them to what the filming is about. And it's again a free program. So I sit on the board of South London Gallery, but I'm also part of the equality committee, which is focusing on the staff, because one other aspect of the art is that not just we don't have much visibility for African artists, but we also don't have many people working in the arts that come from African descent. And one of the reasons is because you don't get paid that much when you work in art. So, and the other aspect is also the exposure to arts. So with the committee, we make sure that anyone from diversity background is not meeting any issues. So if they have any concerns with the way they are, the things are working for them. If they need some help, then they can reach out to that committee I am part of to address those issues and find a solution so that they can feel comfortable and excel at that job in the art world.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love how you also mentioned that African art has been in existence for the longest time, maybe the oldest form of art around, you know. And in fact, if you look at, recently I've been watching a lot of viral videos that are calling out some of these big fashion brands that are stealing African art and infusing it in their own branding and making millions of dollars, while African artists and creators and tribes that own the original pieces are struggling, you know. I want you to speak about that. I want you to speak about that briefly, but I also then want you to talk about, the human rights issues that are going on in Eritrea and some of the ways that African refugees are being treated in Europe, and just your own perspectives and some of the work that you see that is going on to change, to change all of these three things. Now, before you speak, Miriam, I just want to remind our audience members who are watching on YouTube, make sure you leave us with your comment so that we know what you think about today's proverb from Nigeria: truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap. Let us know in the comment what you think. Miriam, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess on the you're absolutely right. We see, I guess recently we've been seeing more and more, a reminder of how African art is being copied and not credited for the creativity behind. It's not new. Picasso did copy African art and got all the credibility and the popularity behind, and that was stolen from African artists. I guess one of the challenges that and the reason why that the West is able to steal from African artists is because African artists are not being seen and valued and exhibited in places that have that kind of exposure, and that's basically Europe or the US. So the more visible artists from Africa are going to be, the more difficult it will be to copy them without crediting them with the actual creativity. So hopefully we'll get there soon.
I love that. So the idea of ensuring that African artists are visible and they are shown with their work as consistently as possible makes it difficult for their work to be copied. I love that. That's why I do these proverbs, because when an African shares these proverbs and we document it on podcast platforms, video, you will not find somebody else actually copying them and using them carelessly. So I feel that I am taking part in preserving a form of African art, which is African proverbs. And of course, African wisdom, lives in these proverbs. But I want you to speak about Eritrea. Eritrea, a lot of the time for me, is a mysterious place, until recently when the new Ethiopian Prime Minister started going there. We started seeing the Eritrean Prime Minister on TV. And then even most recently, he visited Kenya, And in fact, in Kenya right now, as we speak, more than half of the country are out in the street. We have an illegitimate government that is about to be kicked out of the State House because of how the West actually influenced bringing into power the current illegitimate government in Kenya. And I feel that the West does a lot of interference in the affairs of Africa. Even if you look at Nigeria right now, people are accepting, but they're not moving on, And I just wonder, like, from your own perspective, from an artistic perspective, from your own observation, from your experiences as someone who has lived in France and the UK. How do you see the situation back in Eritrea and just in general Africa?
Yeah, I guess the challenge for non-Eritrean when it comes to Eritrea is you don't see what is happening on the ground unless you read the reports and the human rights report that are published on an annual basis, and if you also listen to the testimonies of Eritreans who have fled the country, because Eritrea became independent about in 1993 after a referendum. The war for independence ended in 1991. But we haven't had any elections since the independence, so 3 decades of the same president, which was not elected. He was a part of the interim government that was tasked with getting the constitution together and preparing for election. But election have not happened. You don't have any opposition allowed in the country. You have only a state-owned media, so you don't have any privately owned media. And anyone who is speaking against or criticizing the regime ends up in jail with no trial. So there's been 3 decades of people getting in jail without any trial, and you have also indefinite military service. So you have countries where you have the military service is mandatory, but it's usually 2 years or 18 months. In Eritrea, there's no end date. So not only there's no end date, but also the people who are in the military service might be sent to work. So they call it modern day slavery. So they are sent to work in factories or for very, very little money. So the current state of Eritrea is and you don't have any freedom of movement. That's another thing. So you have checkpoints, and you need to have a permit as a Eritrean citizen to be able to move around the country. And you cannot leave the country as an Eritrean. You need to have an exit visa, which is unlikely to be granted by the government. So today, for the last few decades, we often hear about Eritreans as refugees coming to Europe. Or the US. Eritreans are fleeing the country because they are fleeing indefinite military service, they are fleeing oppression, they're fleeing persecution because of their religious belief. Pentecostal or people cannot practice their religion, for example. So we do have a lot of Eritreans leaving the country for those for human rights issues. And when it comes to the point you were making about the West interference, it's an interesting one because we often hear you would have those who are supporting the current state of Eritrea would argue that it is standing strongly against the Western interference, but that's more complex. That's not entirely true. You have a lot of investments that are made by American companies or European companies or Australian companies. So there isn't really that argument doesn't really stand. So human rights in Eritrea are non-existent today, and there are reports coming out on an annual basis about how bad it is. And yes, the Eritrean president did go to Kenya recently, and there was a press conference that was held. And interestingly, one of the journalists asked a question about what was the plan after his presidency, whether he had planned to step down or if he was going to stay as a president until he dies. And he had a very bad reaction to that question.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible the histories of our countries, and especially Eritrea. And I just want you to also speak about something that I saw you post on International Women's Day. The Jigna women fighters, the Eritrean Liberation Front. I love stories about women liberation fighters in Africa. They are rarely talked about, and that makes me very mad, because I know how hard my mom worked, and I know that if my mom was Eritrean in 1977, she would be one of these women with an AK-47, liberating her community. Talk to me about why this is important to you, the story of the Jigna women. Just say it properly if I don't say it well.
No, yeah, absolutely. I know I mentioned the state of Eritrea, but I think the important thing, which is, in Eritrea, but also I guess it's probably something across Africa, is the love that the people have for their community and for their country. And during the War of Independence, it was not only men who went to fight for the liberation of the country, it was also women. They had similar position. They were fighting. They were trained. They were either medical on the medical side, or they were fighting along with men. And that's something that is very important, because we come from women, and the thought that those before you were strong women that would sacrifice their life to protect not only their children, but also the broader community, is something that is very powerful. My mom was actually a freedom fighter along with my dad, so that's before we came to France. And whenever I see women fighting or represented as fighters, it's for me it's a strong message that women really carry the community, carry their country, and without women, there wasn't. And it's interesting to me because despite the contribution of women, they don't necessarily hold as much power after the liberation as men do. So that's something that is also interesting to me: the contribution versus the recognition. We need to recognize more African women who are fighting for their people.
Thank you so much. I just love having this conversation with you. I feel like questions keep coming up. I have one more question for you, but I want to engage our audience members, especially those who are on YouTube, who join us consistently, and those who are joining us on LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok. Those who are on TikTok, make sure you share the link, and also make sure you share with me in the comments where in the world you're joining us from. And I'm here with a really, really wonderful guest, Miriam Segen, who is the founder of the African Art Society. And the African Art Society was set up to connect audiences to contemporary artists of African descent. And Miriam also sits on the Equalities Advisory Committee of South London Gallery. We've talked about so many things, from what inspires her, as from her childhood to do the work that she does today. We've talked about, the human rights situation in Eritrea. We've talked about the freedom fighters, the women freedom fighters. This is still March Women History Month, and we just celebrated International Women's Day. And so we just talked about some of the women that fought for the independence, the freedom of Eritrea. Miriam, because you're very knowledgeable and because you're in London, as we are hearing from our guests, as we are getting the comments, I want to give you all some shout out. So if you're on YouTube, make sure you let me know where in the world you're joining us from so that I can give you a shout out before the end of the show. And also make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at Okello Javan or AFIAPodcast, African Father in America podcast. Miriam, one of the things that fascinate me and annoy me at the same time is the story of these stolen African artifacts. Last year during Africa Day, I interviewed someone from London. He's an executive director of an organization in London that documents all the stolen African artifacts. I wanted you to speak about that. In your work with the African Art Society, have you interacted with any of these stolen artifacts? And what are your thoughts? Should they all be returned to Africa where they were stolen from? Or should they just be taken care of and African people in the countries where these artifacts are be given the authority to take care of these artifacts, but also make some money off of them? Because you're in the gallery business and art galleries make a lot of money, but we need money to go to the communities where even some of the heads of leaders from Africa are still in London warehouses and galleries, and these are things that concern me. Speak to that for a moment.
I think the first France has started to do. There was a research that was made to identify how many artifacts had been stolen. The report was quite massive, and I think Germany had done something similar following up. And they are talking about intention to return those artifacts. I think there are a long way of actually returning the artifact. The acknowledgement is one step. What we want to see is the return of those artifacts. The UK is more reluctant. The British Museum doesn't want to return those artifacts. In my opinion, that should be returned. As you mentioned, there's two aspects of it. Those are art. This is art that has been created by Africans, and the importance of those artifacts is that they are representative of the local community. They do mean something. It's part of history. When you take away art from anywhere in Africa, you take away the history of that country. The history and the culture is important because it allows us to know where we're coming from. So that's the first aspect, the need for that art to be close to the community that whose ancestors have created those art. The other element is the financial aspect. As a museum in Benin, in the capital of Benin, you can lend the art to a museum in New York, for example, if you want, because obviously art, everyone needs to see art, whatever the countries has created that art. But you can today museums are borrowing art from each other to show the art to the local community. There is a cost behind, but that cost goes to the country where the art was taught initially. So when you return those artifacts, you're not saying that we are gatekeeping those artifacts. You're saying that you want to be able to manage and store and make sure that the art is protected, and that you also are able to give the narrative around the art, how it's been created, how what was the purpose of that art, and that's for the community and the country to control and to define the story around that art. It's not for France, it's not for the UK to say why to tell the story about the art that was created, say, in Cameroon, for example. So that's my perspective. I think that it should go back. And the arguments that are being given by in terms of not returning those art is that those countries don't have the infrastructure to do it. But I think it's a weak argument, and that's something that can be organized. Countries can choose to finance or to fund museum to make sure that this is happening.
Yeah, but also the same people are saying these African countries can't take care of their own artifacts. They're the ones who destroyed the museums in Africa where these artifacts were. They're the ones who destroyed the libraries in Africa, So they should actually pay for the building of these libraries. They should pay the families of the people whose body parts, they're heads of chiefs from Africa. Even a Kenyan chief, their head is still in London somewhere, So the British should be paying, the Germans should be paying for the museums that can preserve these artifacts to be built, because they destroyed it. And history actually shows us that it's not thousands of years ago, it's just a few hundred years ago, not even a few hundred, almost 200 years, ago. So I just thank you so much, Miriam, for being such a wonderful guest. I want to just recognize some of the comments coming from our audience members. I just want to thank everyone who is joining us on TikTok. I haven't been so, very, very active on TikTok the way I'm supposed to be. So now I'm live streaming on TikTok as part of the live broadcast for the African Father in America podcast every Monday to Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That is 5 p.m. East African Time and 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the East Coast of the US. And I think it's around 3 p.m. London time. Is that right? Yeah.
2 p.m.
2 p.m. London time. Okay, great. So, as you know, or as you are seeing or listening, my guest has been Miriam Segen, the founder of the African Art Society. And you should listen to the beginning of this conversation to get caught up on some of the things we covered. But I want to give a shout out to, M. Jewel joining us from Florida. And M. Jewel says that she also feels strongly that the Europeans should return all of the stolen art to Africa. It certainly doesn't represent them in any form outside of thievery, Yeah, if you have artwork that you stole from somewhere and you're still keeping it, then you're a thief, because in a court of law, thieves are always caught with the evidence of what they're being accused of stealing, So I agree with what M. Gerald is saying here. I want to give a shout out to Cabs Destiny, who is also saying, good now, people, truth gives people sleep. That is true. That is in relation to the proverb today. And also Brian Bege is saying hello to you, Segen. He's in Glasgow. And Brian Bege and I used to go to the same boxing gym in Kenya. So we've known each other for a long time. So Brian, thank you. You are one of the people that really, really support me. Even when I was a DJ, long before I moved to Seattle, I was a reggae DJ. Brian supported me. And even when I was in high school, I remember you, Brian. So I just thank you very much for still, checking on me, even from where you are in London. I hope I can see you actually sometime in June. I'm hoping to be in London for a few days. Now, to everybody who will be watching this later on, thank you all. I see a lot of growth on my YouTube channel, and that's where we are putting a lot of energy so that we can grow the African Father in America podcast, so that we can get these African proverbs to many, many people on a day-to-day basis. I feel very, very proud as the father of 3 children here in America who are African children, to have conversations with them around African proverbs on a day-to-day basis, where sometime when I have a difference with one of them, another one brings up an African proverb that solves a problem. I think that is very, very important. And so I want to encourage you, If you haven't invited a friend of yours to subscribe to my channel, this is a good time for you to do that. If you haven't shared the link to today's video, this is a good time for you to do that. And also, if you haven't commented with your own interpretation of today's proverb, the proverb is from Nigeria and it says, "Truth keeps the hand cleaner than soap." Every episode of the African Father in America podcast starts with beautiful African proverbs, and we can't do this without our wonderful guests like Miriam. Miriam, how can people who are watching stay connected with you, and also how can they support the amazing work that you do?
Yeah, so I have my platform is on Instagram. It's called African Art Society. At the moment, I'm mostly putting the spotlight on artists with roots in Africa and trying to have as many coverage of countries as possible. I'm planning on growing this platform into something that is about giving more details on information about art exhibition that you can go and see, but also more profiling about those artists, learning and getting more knowledge about those artists that are coming from Africa. So that's the main platform that I have, and you can follow me there. If you subscribe on the newsletter there as well, I'm working on a newsletter to give more details around that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Miriam. I just want you to know that this is now your platform. Anytime you have an event going on that you want your people to be aware of, anytime there's an issue going on in Eritrea where you want to come and speak about it, this is your platform. So thank you for making the time despite your busy schedule over there in London. And I want to thank Brother Earth. Brother Earth is an amazing supporter of the show. He's also joining us on YouTube. And I want to thank everybody who supported us this week. We've been broadcasting from Monday to today. We take a break over the weekend. We come back again, from Monday to Friday next week. So I thank you all. We can't do this on our own. We have a number of guests lined up for next week. And I just thank you so much. This is the end of our time together today. Miriam, have a nice weekend. Take great care of yourself.
Have a good weekend.
Okay, bye.
African Father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African Father, jikaze, America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javan Okello, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.